Yeah, thanks for the introduction. So my name's Mike McCarthy. I'm an architect at Collective Architecture in Edinburgh. And I'll caveat this presentation just to say that I'm not a green roof expert before I begin, but hopefully we can share some useful insights. I'm going to be doing the presentation, but as you mentioned, my colleague Kathy is in the audience, and between us we can field any questions later if there are any. Today I'm going to try and summarise a recent high-level study we carried out looking at how green roof infrastructure could be incorporated into one of our large-scale new build housing projects, the Meadowbank development. We've tried to condense a 100-page report into this brief presentation today, so we've glossed over some of the topics and simplified others to keep the presentation quite short. But I understand this is a fairly informed audience of landscape architects and engineers and so on. So apologies if some of this is a little basic, but if you are interested, the full report and calculations are available online. And there's a link at the end of this presentation. So Collective Architecture and the design team were commissioned by Nature Scott, formerly Scottish Natural Heritage, and the Scottish Government to carry out this study in collaboration with the City of Edinburgh Council. Our design team consisted of Rayburn Farquhar Bowen landscape architects, Wilrod Davidson structural and civil engineers, David Adamson cost consultant, and green roof consultancy advice came from Dusty Gedge of Green Infrastructure. Just to step back a bit and give you a quick overview of the Meadowbank project, Collective Architecture have been working with the City of Edinburgh Council on the Meadowbank development since early 2018 to develop a mixed-use but largely residential-led plan. For those of you that are not from Edinburgh, the site is located on the former Meadowbank Stadium, which is very close to the city centre with great transport links to both the city and the coast. I'll just skip back so you can see just the overview of the site here. The Meadowbank site is highlighted with a red boundary line. You've got the coast, Portobello, out to the east, and the city centre of Edinburgh to the west. So 20 minutes to the city centre of Edinburgh and 15-20 minutes out to Portobello, so really well connected. The council wanted to consolidate the land, replacing the stadium with a brand new sports centre, which has been designed by another practice, Holmes Miller Architects, and use the rest of the land for mixed-use development, which is where Collective Architecture came in. The project is currently at master plan stage and currently going through the planning process. So it's a live application at the moment, which will be determined later in the year. The scheme comprises 596 units, and is of mixed tenure with a minimum of 25% affordable housing. So this is the master plan submitted for planning, which is made up of a variety of housing types ranging from 2 to 7 stories across the site. The scheme was developed as a pedestrian priority development with minimal parking on site, helping Edinburgh City Council meet its net zero carbon targets. We propose to green the site as much as possible and promote active travel by encouraging residents to walk and use public transport links with a longer term view to enhance these transport and active travel networks in the local area in future projects. We also tried to retain as many of the existing trees on the site, particularly some very mature Wheatley elms, which is relevant to the conversation later on. The current proposal submitted for planning has no green roofs and adopts an integrated approach using swales and small rain gardens to treat water runoff. This is highlighted in the drawing at the top of the page. The swales are dotted in blue and the rain gardens are the purple sort of blob-like features. We wanted to make it look integrated and natural rather than having, one isolated suds pond. As already noted, this options appraisal is based on a proposal currently subject to a live planning application, and the application itself does not currently require roof types to be specified, and the current outline costs make no provision for green roof infrastructure. However, the City of Edinburgh Council will consider how green roofs could be incorporated at the next stage, taking into account the costs and benefits set out in the study we've carried out. And hopefully we'll cover some of these benefits today. So the question we were asked to broadly explore was, are green roofs viable in Scotland? And to use the Meadowbank Master Plan as a case study for this. Our starting point was to identify key aims for the study, starting with the 3 pillars of sustainability: environmental aims, social aims, and economic aims. The key aim really being to demonstrate the business case for green roof infrastructure in Scotland. And at this point, it is interesting to note that unlike large parts of Europe, there are no mandatory policies or incentive schemes at national level in the UK when it comes to green roof infrastructure. London, as a city, has successfully embedded requirements for green roofs through the planning process and local development plans like the London Plan, leading to a significant increase in their adoptions and placing a weight of expectation on developers and local authorities alike. However, there does not appear to be the same weight of expectation or uptake in Scotland. So taking a step back, we started to look at the key green roof types, working closely with our green roof specialist. The main roof types are obviously extensive, semi-intensive, and intensive. And I think many of you in the audience will know more about these than I do. But for those that don't, in summary, an extensive roof are what most people probably commonly think is a green roof. A sort of green sedum roof can give green roofs a bit of a bad reputation, as they're obviously often badly maintained. These are, however, low cost, lightweight, and low maintenance if used correctly, and can be very successful. Semi-intensive roofs have increased substrate depths to allow for a greater variety of planting, taller grasses, and flowers. This type is medium cost, slightly heavier, and requires more maintenance. Intensive roofs used for terraces, podium decks, areas generally where you want publicly accessible with some vegetation. It's in the name, really. This is a high cost, requiring deeper substrates, increased structure, and regular maintenance. So moving on. So broadly speaking, there's the 3 main types, but what really interested us was 3 variations of the usual types, which were more site-specific to Meadowbank. And the first is the extensive wildflower biodiverse roof. It's similar in style to an extensive roof, but small topographic variations are created in the substrate to create a variety of habitats, from wildflower meadows, dry riverbeds, pools, and boulder areas. This is the type of green roof that our specialist Dusty Gedge advocates over a more conventional extensive roof, because the cost uplift between the two is minimal, but the ecological benefits are significant. Moving on to the second type that was interesting to Meadowbank was the solar green or biosolar roof, which can be used with both intensive and extensive green roofs. This combines typical PV solar array with a green roof. And what was interesting to us was that condensation builds on the underside of these panels and can be used as runoff to maintain the vegetation below and create unique habitats. The third type, which has been covered already in this workshop today, is the blue roof, which again can be used with both extensive and intensive roofs, and is particularly relevant to the Meadowbank development because in terms of water storage capacity, this is obviously a more engineered solution using layers of geotech products to create a drainage layer and a void space, both of which control the flow of water. Water isn't stored permanently, obviously, but is drained very gradually to a specific runoff rate. But unlike other forms of SUDS, blue roof kind of makes use of spaces that may otherwise be redundant without extending beyond the building footprint. This can be used to reduce below ground drainage requirements such as attenuation tanks, which I'll expand on later. So we also took into consideration how the different roof types can be used to create a variety of spaces, from formal to informal, public and private spaces. We also looked at how each roof type can create different uses and applications. For instance, creating opportunities for habitats, for play, for food growing, enhancing health and well-being. And this can be even couldn't be more prevalent in today's COVID-19 sort of times. We allocated these types of roofs to appropriate zones across the site. So we took a place-based approach and assigned a roof type to each building. The overall development is split into 3 sub-sites which have different character areas. So site A, identified here in red, has 5 apartment blocks varying between 4 to 6 stories. The rooftops are not publicly accessible. Site A is bounded by a line of mature Wheatley elms, which are very, very tall and sort of very precious to the local neighbourhood and residents. So it was a given we would look to retain those and design the buildings around them. Site A is also where there are large attenuation tanks below ground level proposed as part of the drainage strategy for the planning proposal. So this part of the site offers opportunities for extensive blue roofs and biodiverse roofs to increase water attenuation at roof level and enhance biodiversity at tree canopy level, creating a link to the Wheatley elms and in particular with the blue roof, potentially reducing the size of the attenuation storage tanks below. So this is just a visual of what that may look like or could look like. So any runoff from the biodiverse roofs would go into the rain gardens and swales at ground level, rather than large storage tanks. Hopefully, a blue roof strategy and a rain garden / swale option would negate the need for these storage tanks in the future, but that obviously all needs to be worked through in detail. The second site has the largest footprint, and excuse me a moment. So there are a variety of building types, and therefore a large variety of roof types could be used here. Areas of intensive roofs allow residents to sit out. Potentially biodiverse roofs would provide visual amenity, as there's lots of potential overlooking as the massing undulates between 2 and 3 story developments to 5 or 6 story buildings. There's also potential for green walls to gable ends to soften boundary conditions too. And here is a quick visual of the kind of character of that area, sort of 2 to 3 story colonies, we call them in Edinburgh, but they're quite a Scottish specific typology with a staircase up to a 2-story maisonette flat with a ground floor single story unit. Here there are opportunities to sort of embed green roof infrastructure into the low level structures like bike stores, bin stores, planters at podium levels that residents can look after. So site C has the largest density of the site, with opportunities for essentially it's one large block with an average height of between 4 to 7 stories, and lots of opportunities for ground level public spaces, raised podium decks for residents with both semi-intensive and intensive roofs. There is also potential in the project for a GP surgery to be incorporated in this part of the site, which is still being negotiated. But there's a nice link there between potentially roof gardens and horticultural therapy and learning. This block also faces Holyrood Park to the south, where the great northern Argus butterfly is a native but endangered species. And Site C offers opportunities to create new and unique habitats to support these. And here's a sort of image of the variety of kind of green roof infrastructure we could incorporate. Image shows low-level podium access for public, notionally a raised deck there, which could be a sort of horticultural therapy linked to the GP surgery. And then at roof level, you may have sort of areas that are public accessible for the residents, and then biodiverse and semi-intensive roofs higher up. So taking the site-by-site approach, we calculated the impact of the attenuation volume, comparing the green roof strategy to a traditional roof approach, which uses below-ground tanks rather than suds. In total, with the green roof infrastructure, we worked out there would be a 37.8% reduction in the attenuation volumes and tank sizes. This was calculated based on a greenfield runoff rate, based on a 200-year storm event, plus 40% climate change allowance. Other benefits include reduction of underground pipe work and potential clashes, reduction of interference with contaminated land, and remediation works. And this is particularly relevant for the Meadowbank site, as it is possibly one of the largest brownfield sites so close to the city centre, but generally relevant for all brownfield site locations where green roof infrastructure can reduce the risks associated with these issues at ground level. At a very high level, we also compared the green roof strategy to a single suds pond approach. So if the attenuation volume required was consolidated in one place, a pond, what would this impact be on the site? So based on the average density of 110 homes per hectare, we calculated that the pond would take up the area equivalent to 40 homes. So in effect, the green roofs help to release developable area on the site. And this could apply to any project really, but yeah, it's a site-specific approach. We also reviewed the structural implications of green roofs. The key headline is that green roofs can add 2 to 3 stories of dead load onto a building. Therefore, there is a limit to how cost effective this is based on the height of the building. Proportionally, however, the structural load diminishes as the building height increases. Therefore, our conclusion is that it is not cost effective on buildings that 2 to 3 stories, as this would likely impact on the form of construction. For instance, on the Meadowbank project, a 2 to 3 story building may change from a standard timber kit to a steel frame or a hybrid solution. However, it has relatively doesn't have any implications on buildings above that height. So looking at the costs, taking all of this into consideration, the all-important costs show that, of course, adding green roofs is more expensive, but not as much as you may think. On the Meadowbank development, roofing costs was increased by approximately £209,000, which was an uplift of just over 6% compared to the scheme costed for planning. However, as a percentage of the overall construction value, the increase is significantly less than 0.25%, which is pretty minimal. To put this in perspective, if you were to take the total increase and split this between all of the proposed dwellings, 596 units, this would equal about £350 per dwelling, which is not a lot considering the benefits. We also reviewed the life cycle costs at a very high level, taking into consideration maintenance. The net present value was positive over a 30-year period, and the payback period of this investment is estimated to be between 6 to 20 years. It's important to remember, though, that value is not just financial and shouldn't be measured that way. There are also wider benefits. These benefits are the health and well-being, community opportunities, urban cooling, and wildlife. And some of the benefits particularly relevant to the Meadowbank site are linking green roofs to the potential green roof surgery, GP surgery, as previously discussed, and also creating unique habitats for native species and endangered species, but also just creating an environment that is pleasant and appealing to the residents, particularly in this current situation where not everyone has gardens, massive gardens, or huge terrace spaces. But that visual amenity is a huge benefit for people's mental health. So all in all, are green roofs viable in Scotland? And based on this study, we think they are. And our conclusion was yes, they are. In summary, there is a small uplift in roofing costs, but minimal percentage uplift on construction costs. The net present value is positive. The payback is 6 to 20 years for this particular development. Significant reduction of attenuation volumes resulting in below ground infrastructure cost savings. And also a note to say that perhaps it's not so economical on structures below 3 stories, but it's about being strategical and locating green roof infrastructure where it's going to maximize the wider benefits, social, ecological, environmental, and well-being benefits. So the next steps, I suppose, for the Meadowbank project in particular are that the City of Edinburgh Council were encouraged by the findings of this report, and hopefully we can integrate some of these findings during the next stage of the design process, assuming that we get planning later in the year. But all being well, we would look to embed some of these ideas moving forward. Thanks for listening. Hopefully you find some of that interesting, and do visit Nature Scott's website for the full report if you're interested. So I will hand back to the floor now. That is me.